in the spirit of trying to make my money go further and yet achieve some enjoyment of amateur astronomy, I'm sharing with you what I'm doing with a very cheap 50 millimeter telescope that I got from a charity shop. I paid £15 for this Celestron Power Seeker 50 mil AZ refracting telescope. And okay, it is what it is, but what on earth is it doing in this arrangement? Well, let me tell you, maybe this is some homebrew ideas you can extend yourself. The first you'll notice is the tripod. This is a York type mount, alt-as tripod. So basically it goes up and down, left and right, no surprises. And this was a replacement for the original scope, the telescope mount that came with this scope, which was a very thin, light, and to be honest, very flimsy aluminum tripod. The telescope really is very light itself. It has no mass, and it was only mounted via a little loop single point in the middle of the telescope. And of course, when I looked at the planets, they would zip around and bounce around like lizard patterns that you might see on an oscilloscope, simply because there was no mass and no stability, and it was, yeah, it is what it was. Optically, however, this 50 mil scope is surprisingly good. I mean, it's better than binoculars, it's better than my eyes. I've been able to split double stars. I've been able to split the trapezium, all 4 stars, in the Orion Nebula M42. And yeah, it will bide me over while I learn the sky, and but I just have to make it a little bit, a little bit more easy to use. So the first thing to do was to replace the original tripod, and the charity shop also had a very old, non-name generic scope on a York mount, this wooden old-fashioned York mount. And so I swapped the two. I got rid of the old optical tube and the other scope, which wasn't worth much, and mated the Celestron to the York mount. And the way I did that is simply made a wooden bracket. You can see it's basically 3 bits of wood with some space carved out in the middle for the support. I haven't damaged the support anyway, so it's still there. I've kind of done a little bit of a cable tie here to keep it on the end of the wood. And for the brackets, well, these are the original bolts that go in, and it turns out they're made in Japan. They're M8 threads, and I happen to have a couple of these T-nut M8 threads, so there's one on the other side there. And it works, it pivots, and it rotates. So that's the first problem of managing the scope, and that was solved. The second issue was the finder sight. This came with a little small little finder sight, and it was attached to these little metal bolts here coming out of the side of the scope, and it's dreadful. Couldn't see anything. It had this black crosshairs, which couldn't be used in the nighttime because obviously everything's black on black. Very hard to keep aligned with the scope. It was dreadful. So I invested in a Telrad, and I'm very, very happy with the Telrad. However, taking the Telrad out for the first time, of course, you notice that this glass screen fogs up very, very quickly. And so the next iteration that I made was a little homemade heater. This is a 100 ohm power resistor, and I've attached it, I've soldered it to a little bit of printed circuit board copper that provides a heat sink, and plug it into plug that into a 12-volt battery. You'll get about 1.4 watts of heating power. It's like a hot cup of coffee. Comes off the heat sink, goes right into the glass here, and works a treat. If you breathe heavily onto it, the fog just disappears instantly. So big improvement there. You'll also notice that the Telrad, in one of my other videos, I showed how I installed the Telrad pulsar kit that kind of flashes the circles on and off. Check that out if you want to see how that happens. The other thing, mass. Both the Telrad's very light, the scope is very light, so stuff was still bouncing around. So one idea I had was to use these cheap and cheerful exercise weights. These are wrist weights that you would strap on your wrist when you're running or jogging. And the advantage of these things is they're very pliable and flexible and soft. They don't damage any gear. And I've just Velcroed them on in the places where I think I can get central mass distribution underneath and on the side and even in the front here. So the result is, a scope which holds its attitude quite well. Not a problem until you get to sort of stuff which is perhaps towards the horizon, and yep, it doesn't quite balance. And that's because, of course, all the mass is sort of somewhat sitting above the pivot point, and I haven't found the sweet spot for it. So to fix that, to work with objects that are close to the center, I'm going to employ a tennis ball on a string. And when you get close to the horizon, just inch this out and the scope will come down and sit on that. And you can do it quite a far way out before it falls off. I mean, you can see it's just being held on by the skin of the teeth. But because it's a York mount, it pivots completely. And so again, increases the angle of support. There you go. And of course, if I'm pointing up, I don't want to lose the ball. So it sits on a bit of string and doesn't go anywhere. Inside this is a large nut, which is not going to pull out. You can probably just see it in there. So there you go. Astronomy on a shoestring. The scope cost me 15 pounds in a charity store. These cost me about 7 pounds in a local shop on the high street. I found this one at a local car boot sale. The Telrad was by far the most expensive purchase at 45 pounds or so. But I think it's well worth the investment in terms of improving navigation around the sky. The heater, hey, it's just a resistor. Just a resistor that can distribute and handle enough power to heat this whole area up. Some people are, drilling in the Telrad and getting access to it and physically mounting it in there. I'm just sticking it in with a bit of wire, and I'll run that wire into a car battery or something like a 12-volt source, and hopefully have a lot of fun hours with it. So I'm just sharing it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.